Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm joined by my friends Eric and Sriya. And so I was at Dandenong Hospital last year, but Eric and Sriya were placed rurally. And so I thought it'd be useful to talk a bit about what rural placement was like in our sort of first year of clinical placement. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I can go first, if that's okay, Shreya. My name's Eric. I guess I met Darren in first year. I forgot how we met particularly, but um, I am an undergraduate student, so I am turning 22 this year, and I'm originally from Victoria, around like East Side, like Ringwood area, if you know what that is. And I was placed in Warragul last year for my third year clinical placements, and this year I'm in Burnsdale, which is like if you don't know where that is, I don't blame you. It's very far out. It's like 4 hours out from Melbourne, but it was really good, and I'm excited to tell you guys about my experience today. And thank you so much for Darren for having me.
Yeah, I don't actually remember how we met as well. I just feel like I see you quite often at various events.
I'm just around, yeah.
I'm Shreya.
So hi, I'm Shriya. I'm originally from rural New South Wales, sort of near the border between Queensland and New South Wales. I met Darren, I think in first year, but mainly got to know him in second year because we had anatomy together. Last year I was in Traralgon, which is sort of like, I guess, the metro part of Gippsland in Victoria, and this year I'm Metro in Melbourne, and it's been good to see the differences between the two. But I really did enjoy rural last year, and I'm keen to talk about that.
You don't have to explain where you met me, but it's fine either way. All right, so do you want to talk a bit about the locations where you were last year and whether you chose it or why you chose it? Because I didn't get to preference metro wise. I think for me it was just I picked metro, and then I can apply for some consideration, but then they just put me wherever. But for you guys, I think you could pick more specifically.
For me, I was placed in Warragul last year, and yeah, I think that's actually one of the reasons why people choose rural over metro, especially at Monash, because rural you have a bit more control over where you go, and also because you move out, you're also the travel time actually I think averages out to be better than like the average metro student because you get put in Monash accommodation, which is typically like less than 10 minutes drive away from the hospital, and we get like free parking, so it's really good. But in terms of why I actually chose Warragul, it unfortunately as it like I didn't really choose it for the actual hospital itself. I choose it more for like the experience of like moving out. Like I've always been someone who was like dependent on their parents. Warragul is like the closest rural site to Melbourne. It's only an hour drive away, so I kind of did it for my own convenience, I guess. But I will say it really did help being able to go back to my parents every week, and just like hang out at home and have like eat my mom's food and all that stuff. And I thought like because I'm ERC and I have 3 years to kind of move out, like I would progressively get further and further away. And I just thought for my first year I wanted to ease into that process, so that's why I picked Warrigal. But I did end up having quite a good experience at the hospital as well, which I think I'll touch on later. Yeah.
That's a pretty good plan of attack. You just go further and further each each year. And Shreya, why Traralgon?
So I'm not an ERC student, hence why I Metro this year. But I was keen on trying rural at some point during med school. I am bonded, so I will have the sort of rural return of service thing after med school as well. So then I thought it'd be good to try it during med school. I picked Traralgon because it seemed like one of the bigger sites available in Gippsland, and it's not too far, unlike like Bendigo and Mildura for me. And regardless, I had to move out of home anyway, so because I'm interstate. So I just kind of picked Traralgon for like the availability of opportunities and stuff.
Also, I know I didn't really. Sorry, this is Eric, by the way. I didn't really pick to go rural, but it was also. I don't know if we're going to cover this later, but I think I'll just touch on it now. It's good actually to go rural because as much as I did make friends in first and second year of med school. I always found that like a bit of a hard process because in high school you're just always with the same people and you just naturally become close that way. But in med school, you kind of just see them in classes and like you kind of talk for a bit and then you never see them again. So that was also really good for me as someone who's naturally a bit more like shy and introverted to kind of be forced to like literally live with other students. And we actually became very close that way. So that was like another benefit. Even though I didn't choose to go rural, that was maybe one of the reasons why I might have chosen to go rural if I wasn't ERC.
Can you guys give a bit of a background to your hospitals as well? Like, in the sense that like, are your hospitals big or small, and kind of what are they known for? Because for me, apart from Bendigo, I don't really know that much about the other rural hospitals.
So Traralgon is, I'm pretty sure, like the biggest hospital in the Gippsland area. It's got like a relatively large trauma center, I guess, for a rural hospital. They have like several specialties, and I think they liaise with the Alfred as well. So a lot of like resources get shared between Alfred and La Trobe. And the other thing is they have like quite an extensive oncology department. Like they have the whole Gippsland Oncology Center, and we got to do like placements, particularly in onc with the consultants there as well, which was really good. I think that's mainly what made Traralgon unique.
In terms of Warwick Rule, probably don't know much about us because there isn't too much to know actually. We're kind of not unfortunate, but we're kind of in like an awkward position where we're between Casey, which is like kind of like the last. I don't know if it's how big it is, but like it seems like quite a big site. And then Traralgon, which is like further down. So we're kind of in the middle of those two. So a lot of our patients actually like if they couldn't be managed there, they would just get transferred to either of those sites. So we didn't have too many specialties, but we did have a few regular like general surgeons and a few specialty surgeons that would come down, including like I think a few orthopedic surgeons, and I think they did a few vascular surgeries there as well. We didn't have more of the niche specialties like cardiology or like neurology. But besides from that, we did have a like I think there's actually quite an extensive palliative care um, consulting room, which I think Warrigal does a bit of the Gippsland palliative care consulting stuff. But besides from that, it is quite a small hospital. So isn't too much to say, but it's very cozy, and it for year 3 it had all the like essential like it didn't have the exciting cases, but it had the like very like bread and butter cases that you would need to know. So that was always good about it.
I think I'll talk a bit about Dandenong as well, just as a point of comparison, and I don't think I've talked that much about it. But in my mind, Dandenong's like a smaller-ish hospital that's good at very specific things. So apparently we have a really big and good orthopedics department. But yeah, in terms of like internal medicine, we didn't have any of the specialties. Like we don't have neurology. They don't have wards, at least. They don't have neurology or nephrology or whatever. It's all just gen med. But then the teams would like come in and just see patients under gen med. But I think same as Eric, it didn't need to be that specific for third year. It was just good seeing the like very common issues. So overall, with your like, what rotations do you guys have? How long did they go for, and what kind of classes as well throughout?
At the beginning of the year, the rotations we had, I wrote this down. So like, don't remember too well, but we had Gen Med, Gen Surg, ED, which is a really good one for third year. I feel like ED is probably like the best rotation you can be on for third year because it's just a lot of the acute stuff. And it's very much like clinical examination and history focused and like very acute management, which is really good for third year because a lot of the cases are like related to ED. And then we had oncology, endoscopy, consulting suites, which was just like a variety of like consultants from different specialties. And then we had theater, which only a few of us actually went to. That kind of just became blended with Surge. So yeah, I forgot what the other part of the question was.
We can go into it later, but like the classes. Actually, I think we'll talk about that later because that's probably a big,
Okay, sure.
big thing to discuss. Shreya, how are your rotations?
They were good. I actually just pulled up the timetable so I could see. We had a lot of gen med. We had like 6 weeks each semester just on gen med because similar to what you guys said, we didn't have like a nephrology ward or neurology ward or anything. It was more like the specialist would come around the gen med ward and see everybody. We had 6 weeks of gen med and then 6 weeks of gen surge. We also had an anesthetics rotation, which was probably one of my favorites. It was really good. And we also had 3 weeks of an ED rotation, which is good because I found out that like a lot of the metro sites or like other hospitals didn't offer an ED rotation. So it was good seeing that as a med student because it's a lot of the stuff that you can apply, like acute cases with like more acute management. I thought it was a bit more relevant to the matrix and the sort of stuff that you get assessed on, as opposed to the more chronic conditions, which I find is more like relevant to GP this year. And yeah, and then we also had the oncology rotation, like I said before. And we had a couple days in like cath lab and with the radiographer doing the echoes as well. But I would say main important parts were like ED, Gen Med, and Annie's. But yeah.
Yeah, same for
Yeah.
us. Yeah, you go.
Oh no, I didn't talk about the timing, but yeah, ours was the same. At the beginning of the year, it was 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, like for all the, which was actually very, very, very like fast. And actually, towards the end of the year, we asked to get a change to 6 weeks. So even though it's good to kind of just like say hi and like dip out, like when you are in like a ward for a longer period of time, you get to know like your team, and then they also know you and they'll involve you more. So I think we were similar to other places where we would do 6 weeks, 6 weeks with like a few of the more niche specialties just kind of interdispersed between the big ones. So similar to other sites. But I think Metro had a bit longer places. It differed by hospital, but Darren will have to correct me there.
Yeah, I think my rotations were pretty long, I think, compared to some of the other Metro ones. So my ones were all 5 weeks each. And I actually did 15 weeks of Gen Med. So how long were our semesters? Like 16?
I'm so sorry. I think it's 18, yeah.
Yeah, so 36 weeks. And so about a bit less than half of that was Gen Med. Because we started on Gen Med and then we go back to whatever we start on. But some other groups started on Ortho or Gen Surg. But I thought 5 weeks was a good amount. And you get to know the team a bit better. Get a bit closer with them. And so with classes, did you guys find you had a lot of support and structure with those?
I think Metro definitely has a bit more formal teaching in that aspect, because I heard that you guys would go to like, at least for like the people in the city, they would like go to like the Alfred and go sit down to the lecture and do all that. So in terms of that, no, we didn't have those like at least in-person classes because we were all kind of spread out throughout Gippsland. However, we did get a lot of like Zoom teaching, which was a lot of it was based in Traralgon. So we got like I think every site actually kind of differs based on the specialists there who are willing to teach. But we had this neurologist guy who taught us a lot, and I think we had a few emergency surgical stuff as well. So it really depends on which site you get in terms of which specialty teaching you're exposed to. I heard that Bendigo gets a lot of like ophthalmology teaching as well. So in that aspect, we're kind of not too different to the other sites, but I think everyone's teaching is a bit different based on the doctors that are there that want to teach.
Yeah. Is my mic better now, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd probably say the same thing. Like the teaching, I wouldn't say is the same as Metro. The main thing being we didn't have like lectures or like a full day dedicated to lectures or anything. But I would say Traralgon was probably one of the heavier sites in that we had quite a few classes. Typically really late classes, like sometimes around like 7, 8 p.m. just because that's when like the consultants would be free. But on Wednesdays we had like our PBLs, which were really useful. And then after that, I think pretty unique to Traralgon, we had this case-based teaching class every week. And it was basically one of the consultants, the same guy every week, he would go through like specific cases with us that were relevant to the PBLs. And we found that really, really useful. And then a couple times during the semester, he would get all of the Gippsland students to come in for case-based teaching. I'd probably say that's like one of my favorite classes or most useful classes I've had in med so far. But outside of that, it was just like the typical radiology, Zoom sort of stuff, and then random classes whenever the consultants wanted to teach.
Yeah, I think I forgot to add as well. We also got, sorry, Darren. We also got like those PBL teachings. I think those were standardized across all the sites as well. We also got like some case-based teaching from one of the GPs that was in Warragul. So I think it's run by a different person at each site. But because we were like a bit of a smaller group, I think that was beneficial that like you couldn't just like really hide like you do in like the big lecture halls and just wait for other people. Like they really encourage you to get involved. I think that's not just a Warragul thing. I think that's like a rural thing. Is that like the classes are a lot smaller and you're really encouraged to participate in the learning, which is a bit daunting. But I think I grew a lot as a medical student last year because of that. But yeah, I just wanted to add that I think in terms of like the PBL and those stuff, those are standardized across all sites as much as they can. So we also got that as well.
It sounds like do you guys change who teaches you every rotation, or did you have the same person?
We had the same.
Yeah, Traralgon was probably, I think, one of the bigger rural sites. So we had about like 24 people, whereas Warragul and Sale, I think, had like 8 each. So we had like 3 different PBL groups. So throughout the year, we would swap like who the tutor was. So we kind of got an even, like we got to experience like the teaching from every tutor, but the case-based teaching was the same person throughout the whole year and everything. I would say those are like the 2 constants that we had throughout the year. Everything else was kind of a hit or miss, not gonna lie.
And lectures, did you guys get lectures? Because for us, I think Alfred had their classic lectures every Wednesday, but then all our lectures were all recorded and on the website for us to watch in our own time. So we didn't have anything arranged.
Yeah, I would say the same for us. Like we just had the ones available on Moodle, and then like John Lee's teaching on Friday, but we didn't have scheduled lectures every week. It was more just like, for example, we had this ED consultant come in once, and he taught us about like, acute management of certain emergencies, but it wasn't like Wednesday 9 to 3, you're just gonna have lectures or anything.
All right. How about you take us through like a typical day? I think for me, there were like 3 types of days. Either I had a class that day, or I was on a non-surgical rotation day, or I was on a surgical rotation day. I feel like within those, each day was fairly similar, but then between them, like each day was a bit different. How about for you guys?
I agree. It definitely differs. Like if you have a class, like you just go to the class, you take notes, and then you just go home and chill for the rest of the day. For us though, I was gonna mention this year. I think we had an attendance requirement. I don't think that's like a thing across like all sites, but we had to be at the hospital like at least 3 days a week. But because there were only 8 of us, it was very, very flexible, like what time you went in, which I will admit we did kind of abuse a little bit at some points. Like sometimes we'd be going in at like 10 p.m. to get signed off. But that was like kind of also good because we could really adjust based on our schedule. Like for example, like I had a job, so if I was working like 9 to 5, part time, then I could go into hospital like after that, which I'm not sure at metro sites you have that same flexibility because I heard that a lot of people like you're just on a ward, you have to show up at like this time and then you leave at like lunch or something. So that was really good. But sorry, in terms of a typical day in the life, if I had class, I'd wake up early. But if I like didn't have class, then that would be my day too. I'd just like I'd usually sleep in a little bit. And a lot of it depends on which team you're on, but a lot of the teams were very fine with med students just dropping in and just doing their own thing and then taking histories and then leaving whenever they need to. So I generally had very flexible days, so I don't think there was But at the beginning of the year, I definitely was waking up at like 8 o'clock to attend the ward rounds, which kind of dropped off towards the end of the year. But I think that's more of like a typical day. But yeah, it was very flexible in Warragul.
Yeah, I would say something similar. But the timetable in Traralgon, it was very like rotation specific. So for Gen Med, it would be like typical 8 to 12. We were expected to be on wards from 8 to 12, 3 days a week. And then on Wednesdays, we would have our teaching day. So that would be like PVR and the case-based thing I was talking about before. So yeah, it really depended on the rotation. For Surge, for example, sometimes you'd start at 7, but like Eric was saying, towards the end of the year, things sort of changed a little bit. in terms of how often people were going and like how early they'd be leaving. Generally, it was pretty flexible. I know a lot of people were able to like continue working or get jobs in Traralgon as well. Um, I personally didn't get a job or anything, but I did have quite a bit of free time. In the afternoons, though, like like I said, Traralgon was probably one of the heavier teaching sites. We used to have some class more or less every day. I think they tried to decrease it on Fridays because most people would go back to Melbourne on Fridays, so they wouldn't go towards in the morning. Um, but we'd have like Zoom classes all the time, and then some in-person classes. Um, but yeah, in terms of the actual like in-person contact hours, I would probably say like 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 times a week, maybe.
I know, like, before we go to placement, a pretty classic reason that people say rural is good is because you get more opportunities to do procedures or to take histories, and people might have a bit more time, like teams might have a bit more time to help you with learning all that kind of all those kinds of skills. Did you guys find that was the case last year?
Um, I think the biggest difference for me was that because we had an ED rotation, I got to do more of those procedure type things or acutely seeing patients and assessing them like as soon as they come in from the ambulance or from the waiting room. And I found that the ED consultants were okay with giving us a little bit more responsibility in terms of being like the people to initially see the patient. In terms of Gen Med, I think like the consultants and registrars that are going to teach you no matter where they are. So it really depends on the people you get. I had some really, really good regis that were keen on teaching and would find like whatever opportunity they could to teach me stuff that was relevant for my exams as well. And then there would be I had one consultant for I think 4 weeks on Gen Med. She didn't say a single word to me like the whole time. So that wasn't as useful. So yeah, I think a bit of it depends on luck. Like if you just get dealt like good um consultants or good teams, then you're more likely to have a better experience regardless of whether you're rural or metro.
Yeah, for sure. We also had the same experience. In terms of teaching, well, obviously, like in terms of formal teaching, I think Metro does get more of that. But in terms of like practical, like at the hospital teaching, Warrigal especially being a bit of a smaller hospital, a lot of the time the patients were just there, and the like medical team was also just there with nothing really going on. So a lot of the time, if you did prove that you were like eager and willing to show up and wanting to learn. I found that yeah, as Sri was saying though, like it depends on which team you get, but a lot of the teams that I were on, especially Surge, which was my favorite rotation, even though I have no interest in like pursuing surgery, like that was the best just because the team there was always so happy to take time out of their day to just show the little med student around and do like the cannulas if there were any, help us to take bloods. Um, Not just the medical team, the nursing staff are also very understanding and encouraging of us to do that. Whereas I know at some metro sites, like no one did any actual procedural skills on real patients. So that was like a really big plus that I really enjoyed because I think I don't know, I personally like am quite interested in like getting good at those skills. It's very satisfying to be able to like draw blood from someone and having that experience. It's very different to doing it on a mannequin to doing it on a person. So that was something I really enjoyed. But in terms of the actual teaching, yeah, I agree with Shreya. Just depends on like the doctors that you get and how much time they have and how interested they are in teaching you, which is okay. But yeah, it's just a bit of luck basically.
Yeah, I found that as well. I agree that sometimes it's quite team dependent, but usually because there's so many people in the team, there's usually like one intern or sometimes the reg who likes teaching and likes asking you to do things. I just remember, I think colorectal, I don't know why they were so busy, but the first day I turned up, the intern's like, we're not ignoring you. We just don't have, we're just really busy. There were about, I think like 5 or 6 interns, but they were flat out the whole day from morning to when they were dismissed. And I heard they had to do a lot of overtime as well. So I kind of understood from that perspective. Yeah, so third year is pretty important for, it's kind of the first clinical year. Did you guys find particular areas, like would you think that particular areas are really good to focus on in that year?
I think
I've
like
oh yeah, you go first, Sriya.
um I think just being rural, like you see more of the common stuff. Like you see I guess yeah, like you see more of the bigger emergencies in ED, and while they don't really get managed in rural, you get teaching from like the ED regs or consultants. And also like in the gen med ward, you see like a ton of heart failure, you see a lot of renal failure. So you tend to learn like the management of that stuff really well. But I did have gen med first, and honestly, I didn't really know what was going on at the start of the year, so I don't feel like I used that rotation to the fullest. But I would say it's important to focus on, I guess, recognizing like the common signs of certain conditions, like heart failure, for example, and understanding the management early on. Because I found that I was focusing a lot more on like the pathophys of conditions. And while that's like important and interesting, it's not, I don't know, like it's not that relevant, as opposed to like knowing how you would recognize this in a patient if they presented to ED and how you'd manage it. And ultimately, that's like what you're assessed on as well. At the end of the year, you're not really assessed on like, I don't know what particular enzymes are involved in doing something. Um, so I'd say if I could go back, then I would sort of change up my mindset towards studying and make it a lot more management focused. Um, and don't really get like bogged down in the niche details, because like it's nice to be able to answer like some Reg's question on the wards, but it doesn't really like help in the long term, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with Shreya there. I think I heard a few complaints from metro hospitals where people were being put on like vascular surgery for like 6 weeks, or like I don't know, like renal, which renal is important, but like it's not. It's just like the very common conditions, and common things are common, and the best place to see common conditions is rural, because the not common stuff just gets transferred out to like the Alfred or something. So I think um even though like yeah, interesting cases can be really cool to see and can change up kind of what you're seeing from a day to day. As a third year level, it's you really have to really prioritize what you want to learn, and a lot of the learning that you do is in hospital, especially with the curriculum being a lot more focused towards management, like showing up and seeing those conditions like actually being managed. That really helps, and I think also when you have a lot of specialties, you can get very overwhelmed, and sometimes you can even feel a bit like out of your depth, which I think in like rural, I didn't really have that problem, because I was literally seeing like diverticulitis or a like cholecystitis every like second person, because it's just like so common, and I think they are represented very well rurally, whereas in metro you might get an overrepresentation of some things that are less. I mean, not important, but less common and less relevant for third year specifically. So yeah, that was a good part of rural as well, and it helped me to feel like I'm actually like learning something, because you see it and then you actually see it again. Whereas I feel like sometimes you just see like very niche conditions, and yeah, you might impress a consultant, which is brownie points, but is it going to help you like for that year? Like maybe not.
I think Claire said she was working so she's one of our classmates. So I'm with Shreya on GP at the moment. But yeah, so Claire's one of our classmates. She said she was working in a rural ED, and she said it was really packed because lots of people would go to the ED rather than wait. And there were a lot of complaints that probably didn't need to be in the ED. When you were in the ED last year, was that the case? Do you think it was really busy there?
Um, I don't know if it was really that busy. I think it depends on the time of day. Just because like we're typically there from like 8 to 12, I think not many emergencies happen in that time. They used to say they were really, really busy at nights or on weekends, like Friday night, Saturday night. But those weren't times that I was there. So I got to see more of like the people that had been in ED, since like 1 a.m. that morning and had like an asthma attack or something. So um, yeah, I wouldn't say it was super packed, at least when I was.
Especially being in GP this year as well, I also now can appreciate why. Because like GPs, there's just such a shortage that a lot of the like I don't know, a lot of the wait times are like up to 4 weeks. So if you genuinely do have an emergency, a lot of people will go to ED. in rural areas. Again, same with Sriya, I didn't find that it was too packed at the times that I was going a lot of the time, but there were a few times that I would go where they would literally be like, have ambulance waiting like in the parking and just for beds to be available. It can get very intense, and that's just because I think there's also like a lack of resources. Like we had like how many, like, I don't know, like maybe like 15 beds in ED last year. This year we have literally like, I think like 5 acute beds and like 4 short stays. So it's like very, 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 very small for an ED. And so I think that's part of the reason why it gets so busy. And does tend to be a bit understaffed sometimes. But I think they do their best. And also a lot of the time, in terms of being a medical student, that can be a benefit in the way that you are like the first point of call. So you're like primary care and you get to see them and you get to be involved with kind of the diagnostic process, which is also very important as a third year. So yeah.
Are most of the doctors and the other healthcare people there, are most of them living around the area and work there? Or would you say like half is like that and then half kind of rotate through there? What's the proportion?
I would say out of the sorry, Eric. I would say out of like the nursing staff or allied health, like they tend to just live in the area. But for the doctors, I found that a lot of them were living in Melbourne and then just coming throughout the week. I had one geriatrician that was also my bedside tutor, and he lived, I think it was Clayton or like around here. And then he would come every single day to Traralgon in the morning and then come back home at night. I don't think everybody did that, but there were definitely a lot of people. And then because in those sort of rural areas, a lot of the workforce or like the medical workforce tends to be like registrars or like junior doctors. They tend to rotate a lot. So you just have people there for maybe like 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and then they'd end up back in Metro. So you didn't really see them throughout the year. But yeah.
Yeah, that was the same in Warragul. A lot of the more senior doctors, like consultants, a lot of them were just rotating through, and they would have like their 1 day a week where they would come and consult or come and operate in Warragul. But besides from that, they would be living in Melbourne. Same with Shria as well. Like a lot of the cases are managed by like registrars, at least in the wards, and interns, like junior doctors, and so they would be rotating. So I think I didn't really make note of this, but it was very normalized for us to just constantly be having like different teams, like even like you'd be on the same team, but then the doctor would switch like randomly. But that was very normalized for us. But I guess that was like a very rural thing. A lot of our doctors sometimes would just be locums who were just there for like a week or but then it was also good to like I guess meet new people in that way and hear about other places that they worked at as well.
In terms of things to improve on or things you felt like you would have liked a bit more of at your site, maybe that's linked to the site, maybe that's linked to rural. I'll go first to say. So for my site, I feel like some more structured teaching at the actual hospital would have been nice because we had a doctor, a hematologist who ran our regular clinical skills classes, but he would also teach us a lot of additional things. Like he'd organize lectures for us, we'd book rooms, and then he'd teach us then. Like for example, at the end of the year, we had basically a class that he titled Things, and it was on melanoma, cataracts, and HIV, all in like one lecture. But yeah, I thought if he wasn't there, then it would have been a lot harder to learn about a lot of those topics. So for you guys, did you feel like having more of something would have been nicer last year?
It's hard to think on the fly actually. I don't know if this is like particularly in terms of teaching, but I did sometimes. I don't think this is just a rural issue though. I did sometimes find it a bit hard to adjust to new rotation as like a shyer like student. And I know that a lot of the time like they want you to take initiative, but it's hard when you like already feel kind of like out of place there. So I wish that they had given us like maybe a bit more like support like in the actual hospital. It seemed like we were very supported outside, but once you actually got there, you're kind of just left to like fend for yourself and like introduce yourself and show up and do all that. So as a shy student, there were a few times where I would get a bit of like anxiety showing up, just like being completely honest. And I wish like there was like someone that I could have like gone to like get like introduce me to the team or stuff like that. But I don't know if that was just something that I went through or if that was more widespread.
Yeah, I would say something similar. Like, the first few days on a rotation is quite daunting. Um, like it was usually good for Traralgon at least because you'd have at least one like ward buddy, like one person that was on the same team as you, and then that would be, supportive. And then if you're lost, at least you guys are lost together. Um, but the rotations where we had a fifth year on the team, I found it really helpful because they had like been through it before and then could kind of give you some guidance as a medical student what you're expected to do. But I only had a fifth year maybe like for two rotations throughout the year. So I did end up like wasting quite a bit of time not really sure of what my role was, or how much I was supposed to be participating. For example, we had 6 weeks on Gen Surge, and other than Ortho, that was our one Surge rotation. But for me, a lot of like the regs were away, or like the consultants weren't there consistently, and then also our clinical coordinator wasn't there for that 6 weeks. So I didn't get much opportunity to like scrub in and actually spend time in theatre. I was a lot more time on the wards, and that well, it was really like it was interesting and useful. But the whole point of like the surge rotation is to actually spend time in theater and experience surgery. And I don't feel like I particularly ended up getting that. And I kind of had to take time off of my other rotations to go and do that because I was interested in it. So it would have been good having a bit more guidance or like someone that was out there like scheduling particular things for you to do to make sure that you've experienced them. Because I think by the end of third year, I was in theater like twice. And I was also just like, I only scrubbed in once throughout the whole year as well, which is not what I wanted to end up doing. And the other thing I'd say is same as Darren, like some structured teaching would have been better because a lot of the classes, like I said, were at random times in the evening. And then eventually, like the student reps did talk to the doctors and try to get that sorted out, but it was difficult. And then, like consultants would be late or they'd be busy, and then we'd be on Zoom for half an hour just waiting for the doctor and they'd never show up. And that happened like very frequently towards the end of the year, at least like once or twice a week. We would just have quite a bit of time wasted just waiting for a doctor and they wouldn't show up. So preventing that kind of thing would be really helpful as well.
On that same vein though as well, I guess there is the whole logbook to kind of try to keep you on track, which is like basically if you don't know it, like logbook is just like a bunch of tasks, like histories and exams that you have to get signed off by like your supervisor at the end of the year, and then there's also a bunch of procedural skills like venipuncture, cannula insertion that you need to do. Which I guess you could like say that that does give you a bit of guidance on what your role is. But those were like way too like they were throughout the whole year, so I don't think those really gave you a structure as well. And I think I agree with Shreya in saying like a lot of the time, um, actually most of the time, yeah, I really didn't know what my role was there. Like I know as a student you're there to learn it, but you also don't know the line between like being a burden and just learning because like sometimes they're genuinely busy. I guess it does come with time, like reading the room on like when you can ask questions and participate and when to step back and just watch. But that was something that I guess if I had had a bit more support on at the beginning of the year, that I would have maybe got more out of my first few rotations rather than just struggling to like introduce myself and adapt. So yeah.
Do you feel like the doctors expected students? Like, did they kind of know you guys were coming, or it's kind of like you just rock up and you say hi?
They were expecting us. I think, like I think every doctor is like, part of graduating is you're expected to teach and expected to like educate, and like where you can and stuff. So I think generally, like, yeah, they were expecting students, but we weren't scheduled on like rosters per se. So a lot of the time we just showed up. But I will say that they were usually quite good at adapting to whoever came and with whatever patients they had, especially the interns. I think they really took care of us and what some of the regis as well. The consultants are usually just like quite busy. But they were expecting us, but whether they had the time to teach us was kind of a different story, I think.
Yeah, I would say the same. Like there definitely were the consultants that really liked having med students around and, would take the time to say like a patient had a sign, they would take the time to like bring the student in and be like, can you assess this patient in front of me? And then we can actually talk about it and learn something. But then I also had the consultants like that one on GenMed that I was saying before where I didn't speak to her the whole time. So I don't know if she expected med students around. Um, or I don't even know if she noticed us being there. Um, but yeah, that definitely wasn't as useful. But then there are, the other side of things where we had really good doctors that wanted to actually have students, and they would also be the ones that did the bedside teaching. So even if you were someone that didn't get like the best teaching while you're on your rotation, you'd at least get someone actually passionate for your bedsides once a week. So that was really useful because they would take the time to like find interesting patients and actually talk you through different things. So I guess that made up for it in some ways.
Yeah, I feel like the bedside tutors were quite good because sometimes you feel like these doctors are so much more senior or they've done so much more training, but then they come and teach you in small groups. So it's quite nice breaking that down a bit. With your point
Yeah.
about having some of the classes really late, I feel like because I sort of just stayed at home, uni was kind of part of my life, but then I had a lot of other stuff on. So like, sometimes I'd leave early for swimming training or I'd go home with family or I'd have events around. I feel like if I was rural, then hospital would take a bigger chunk of my life because I feel like I live close to the hospital. I don't have much going on outside of it. I don't know if that was the case with you guys.
Yeah, like for me, I didn't go home on the weekends, right? So like I can't fly back to Brisbane every weekend, so I would just kind of be stuck there. And like the hospital and uni became such a huge part of my life. I became really good friends with my roommates and everything like that, but they used to go home on the weekends, so I'd kind of be by myself. Um, I had some family friends around and whatever, but I didn't like that med was sort of taking over my life and having these classes so late in the day just prevented me from sort of doing what I wanted to do. And Traralgon also had the problem of like maybe we just have a few classes a day, but they'd be placed so weirdly, like the gaps in between wouldn't allow you much time to do anything else. Um, so there were definitely a lot of times when I felt like my time was being wasted, especially when the doctors wouldn't show up, which became quite frequent. So it was kind of hard to have a life outside of medicine. Um, and I definitely do think this class thing contributed to that. I did make stuff a lot worse, but it was okay.
Yeah, it becomes very different when you start living with medical students as well, and then even your home life is kind of been invaded by school. And like, even though you guys try to talk about other things, inevitably you'll talk about like assignments or like what have you done this, which can be helpful because we did try to look out for each other and help each other to get stuff signed off, but it can also be a very toxic like point of comparison. Not that specifically they're trying to do that, but internally, like you start comparing yourself a lot of the time and you can't really escape. So I think learning to give myself alone time and also be more forgiving if I wasn't as up to date with like the tasks that I had to be doing was something that I learned last year, and I think this year I've been a lot better as well because of that. In This is a bit unrelated, but like speaking up in classes, like last year I'd be so scared to like get a question wrong, but because of having to like have that exposure, I've kind of learned that it's okay to like be behind. Everyone's just like moving at different paces at different things. Like there's so many things going on, but it's made me a bit more brave. But I will say, yeah, I think that's why people went home so much is because just living in their house, like you can't really escape a lot of the time, which can be a bit suffocating sometimes.
Did you guys find ways to manage that? Especially Shreya. Like if you can't go home on the weekends, you're just there. Did you find ways to deal with it, or are you just kind of still working it out?
Um, I did kind of get used to the whole living like away from family thing because I've been doing it for all of med, right? But it was hard in like a rural area where my friends were metro and I couldn't see them every weekend and people would be busy. So I used to make plans like with family friends where I could. So I used to see them a lot, but they lived like an hour away, so it wasn't that easy either. Um, and then I used to find that because I had so much more time, I would be really inefficient with studying, and then I'd have to spend more time studying. So in that way, also med sort of took over my life. So it was hard scheduling that like alone time or actually making plans and doing something else. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I like when my roommates were home, we were all sort of the type to want to like just hang out and not really study. I wouldn't say we talked about med too much. So when they were home throughout the week, we typically just hang out for like an hour or so every day, or once we all got back from placement, we just talk about our days, which was really nice. It was a bit harder on the weekends, but at least I had like that sort of social contact during the week, which was good. And I also became
Yeah,
really good friends with one of my interns. So I used to like hang out with her on the weekends as well.
that's
And she was
amazing.
really good. Yeah.
Was she there the whole year?
Yeah, she was there the whole year, and a few of my rotations actually coincided with hers. So she was really good at actually involving me. And then, she would call me if I was on a different rotation, but she had something interesting. So it was really good to make that connection as well, and to have like like a support person outside that wasn't doing med with me per se. It was really good.
Hmm. I also became very close with my housemates, so it's kind of like a double-sided coin where yeah, you are like med students and you're talking about like school all the time, but also we would have like movie nights every week, and we would make like an effort to not talk about it and just talk about it less, which was very um relaxing, I guess, and it would take away. But another thing that I found was just like to physically get myself out of the house sometimes, like go to the gym or to study at the library. I found that that really helps too. But I think that can apply to any student, not just like because I think med is very, it can be very life consuming if you let it. So just having those mechanisms to like have some free time and just chill out is very important, no matter if you're rural or not. I think, yeah.
In terms of the practical aspects of living by yourself, which anyone rural, unless you lived, I think some people in our cohort actually lived or from rural and then they had placement there. But in terms of living by yourself, I would find a lot of those aspects hard. Like I don't know how to cook at all. But did you guys have to learn anything or did you adjust pretty well?
You definitely are
I
forced to
think
learn how to cook, I think. Like you have to, you have to survive somehow. So that was, I really enjoyed that part of it. I don't like, I think I was very ready to move out by the time, so I was kind of lucky. Like I didn't feel like I was being stripped away from my family. So I learned a lot of, I learned how to be alone. I learned how to like keep busy. I learned how to study, better, because I had more time, and I learned how to cook and like take care of myself. Last year I was a bit spoiled because I would go back to my parents every week and they would do my laundry and stuff. But this year I've definitely had to like fend for myself a little bit. But I've really enjoyed that because I think those are things that you don't really get taught if you're not forced to like do it. So I really enjoyed that. But there were a few difficulties which I'll let Trey talk first. But yeah, being away from family and stuff, that was hard.
um I don't know if I have much to add. Like I did live away from home for first and second year as well, but the difference was I was living by myself then. Because like I didn't know anyone from back home that was coming here. But then last year gave me the opportunity to actually live with roommates for the first time, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that's why I have roommates this year as well. But I really liked, having like other people to rely on and other people that relate to you. And especially in med, it's really important to have that support network and stuff like that. So I would say for me, like rural was a bit of a blessing in that regard, because like yeah, I got to live with other people, which was good. Um, and the whole cooking and cleaning thing, like I'd already kind of been used to it over 2 years, so it wasn't too bad. And then when I'd go to my family friends on the weekends, they would like make food for me and give it to me for the week, which was really useful as well.
How often did you go to Brisbane then? Was it just when we had the longer mid-year break, or did you go home any
Yeah,
other time?
no, I just went for the middle 3 weeks because we used to have mid-sem breaks and I'd go
Ah,
back
yeah,
home then, but we
we
don't
used
have
to.
those anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just went once in the middle of the year and then at the end of the year.
On that topic, do you have class tomorrow, Eric? Because I realized we have class tomorrow.
Well, actually Mondays are usually my free days anyway,
Oh,
so It kind of sucks actually. I don't get it, but I think I would have gotten it off if I had. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought I
we
checked
have
the
a
calendar.
late
I thought,
start.
yeah,
We
Okay.
started
At
we
least
started
that's
like 10 or something.
it's something.
yeah. I think we finished a little earlier, like four something as well.
It's good.
Did you guys? Yeah, you go.
Oh no no no! I wasn't. This isn't related to any question, but like I had something that I wanted to write here, which was like, it was really nice, like as a rural student, to a lot of the time, especially this year, um, the patients are actually very grateful to see students. I'm not sure if it's the same experience in Metro, but a lot of the patients I was seeing, they would be like I could literally just drop in and just like take a history from them, and they would be like, oh, like thank you, doctor, which was like so crazy to hear that. But like that, or they would always encourage us to like come back and like you guys need to learn somehow. And so it was like in terms of the patient experience, like the medical experience was like a bit different, but I felt I was always like very very well treated by the patients, and I had a few patients that like who were there for a long time and like I really got to know, and that was really special. So I don't know if that's a uniquely a rural thing, but it is something that I experienced. It was a highlight of my year for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I think patients at Dandenong were pretty good generally as well. Like they're all very happy for me to speak to them or perform procedures. I thought that was a bit nerve-wracking though. Like when you first learned how to do a cannula and then you do it on someone, like an actual
Oh
person,
yeah, because you're gonna
you're
miss
worried
like
you're
obviously.
worried you'll hurt them, and well, it does hurt,
Yeah
but
yeah
then
yeah
you don't know like how much it's meant to hurt.
yeah exactly yeah.
So this can be both in the hospital or outside of the hospital, but did you guys have any particularly interesting experiences? You probably had a lot, but any one that you thought was particularly rural or just an interesting one?
A big part of my last year was sort of like research, and I found so something about like Gippsland or especially Traralgon because they have the major oncology department. They're also really keen on getting students involved in research. So they had a program where they got us to apply for, and 10 students were like selected to do supervised research projects with like an oncologist, and then you get to present at a conference later in the year. And I thought that was really good because a lot of people at other metro sites, you don't really get someone pushing you into research and sort of opening up that field for you. Whereas there were oncologists that were really keen on allowing students to be part of that and also have something to show for it after, like some research experience, something to put on your CV, and conference experience as well, which is really good. And I would say I wasn't actually going to apply for it because I was a little scared last year, but I did, and then I did end up getting it, and it was like a very good experience and a highlight of last year and unique to Gippsland, I guess.
For me as well, I got a part-time job at a GP clinic. I was just working in reception. I wasn't doing much medical stuff, but speaking with the doctors there, it was really interesting to hear about like one-on-one the more personal experiences of and the challenges of being like a rural GP. It's something you hear about all the time, but kind of like in actuality, like um the type of like challenges they go through in terms of like having like no like real doctors, and like always being like really busy and booked, and like not really having the resources as well to support them, as well as the issues with like Medicare. That was really interesting for me to hear about last year as well, especially as I'm like interested in pursuing GP in the future, as, like potentially.
How was doing research in the rural, or just doing research in general? Because I feel like we hear a lot about it, but it's a bit
Yeah,
different doing it.
I think there's like a lot of, I don't know, pressure like in med to take part in research, especially as a student. Um, but like for me, previously, I wasn't really that into research and I didn't think I was good at it. I still don't really think I'm good at it. But it was nice to have that experience. And then also, I was paired up with an oncologist who was really keen on, getting me involved in like some data collection and then some like analysis. And I got to put together like a presentation at the end of the year. And all of my housemates got to do it too. So then we sort of had that support as well. And at the end of the year, we went to Bendigo to present at like a rural conference, which was also a really good experience. I would say it depended on the consulting you go, because some people didn't get that much guidance, whereas for me, mine was pretty like on top of it and pretty keen with like having a set timeline by the time he wanted things done. And he also really like advocated for me actually getting something published, or like having my abstract play a part in the final project at the end, which is good. I would say it was a really nice intro because it wasn't too much pressure. It didn't take like a ridiculous amount of time, but it was a good way to sort of step into the field a little bit and meet people that were interested in research, and having, you know, those contacts for the future as well. And it also opens up opportunities. Like if you wanted, for me, I really liked the project, but I wasn't super into oncology. But now if like I'm trying to get into something else, I can at least say I've had this experience, and that shows that I'm keen. And yeah, it opens doors a little bit, which is good as well.
With the like social aspect of being like physically a bit far away from other people, I know you guys got really close to your housemates, which is good. But did you have other friends that you might have made in pre-clin, or just, you know, high school friends? Did you find that difficult? I think a lot of people turned 21 as well last year. So how was that experience?
It definitely was hard. It did feel a bit isolated. Rural, like you of course have your community, but there are these other people that you've known that are kind of like growing without you a little bit, and that's always hard. I think for Shreya would be different because, you know, she's like interstate from these people, but for me though, it was hard and I did feel lonely at times. But it, like, especially for the 21st, a lot of them, I was still able to attend. Like it's, and like a lot of them are on weekends, so it's not too bad. And I guess one thing I definitely learned last year was to be a better texter. Like a lot of the meetups that I had and the friendships that I kept alive were through effort that I had to put in. So besides from that, it can be a bit isolating at times, but it's definitely doable. And I don't think it's too different to how often I'd be seeing them anyway, given that they're doing their stuff and I also have uni. So yeah, it wasn't too different. I would think I still got kept in touch with a lot of my friends.
Yeah, I would say the same. Like, yeah, it was hard and a bit isolating, but I was already isolated from my family and my high school friends and everything. So having like good roommates, and then I would say, especially in second semester, like the Traralgon cohort spent more time together, outside of classes. So we got to do a lot more things with each other, and we'd actually hang out. So that was really helpful as well. And then, you know, texting and actually like calling more distant friends and spending more time doing that was helpful. But I sort of learned to like really build the friendships that were right, like with me, like with my roommates, for example. Um, and that made things a lot easier in the long run.
But Eric, are the people with you this year different, or is there some overlap with last year?
Because Burnsville is like really small, they don't even take third years. We only have 3 4th years and 2 5th years. Everyone's
3
completely
fourth
new.
years.
I didn't.
You
Yeah,
have 3 fourth.
I think we have the smallest cohort. I'm not sure about Mildura, but it's very very small. So we've definitely had a lot of time to get to know each other. But no, there wasn't any overlap there. It's hard when it's so small. Yeah.
And are you rooming with them, or what's your
Yeah, I'm
accommodation
living with
situation?
them. Yeah, we're all living together in a house.
I guess kind of the final question then is, like, after my third year, I had a lot of thoughts about what I could change in fourth year and improve on, and things I thought I did well. I think one thing for me was that, like, third year, because it was the first year in hospital, I wanted to spend a lot of time there and learn a lot, and yeah, just spend time there. But I think I spent too much time in the hospital, and some rotations, even when I wasn't getting as much out of it because the teams were busy, I kind of just pushed myself to go early in the morning as well, just because it was the first time going through these rotations. But that was just like one thing I wanted to change for this year. Like if I didn't think it was going to be that helpful, then I didn't have to make myself do it. For you guys, are there things that you thought you would change or you would improve upon from last year?
I think that's a very important skill as a third year, is knowing like this is no longer useful for me. I'm just gonna like dip. Because I think like what Shriya was saying as well, and like she feels like her time wasn't like respected as much when the consultants like didn't show up. I think you need to remember that your time is also very important, and you could be using that time to like maybe go home and study or like recharge socially in some way. I was maybe a bit too good at that last year. I definitely like didn't spend as much time in the hospital as maybe I should have. But that was because a lot of the time that people were just busy and it didn't seem like if people were willing to teach, I was happy to stay. But yeah, I could have been there more. So this year, my goal is to actually go in more and get more involved. And another thing that I struggled with last year was I think the way that you're supposed to study kind of changes a little bit from second to third year. Like second year is a lot more like biomedical, like like biomolecular focused and like the physiology and anatomy of stuff. So you have to learn in that way. Whereas in third year, it's more framed around like conditions and management. So that was something that I kind of found my footing for how to study towards the end of the year, which I'm now able to use this year. Um, and then the final thing would probably be like just like learning the importance of getting to know your team. Like it's such a world of difference between someone who like introduces themselves, and it's not like necessarily sucking up more than just like making them know you're there, and also just being liked, which is like just so that they're more likely to include you in opportunities and stuff, and that's actually like really important. So and also like telling the difference between when someone's busy or when someone's just like not sure if you're interested. So just making sure that if they are busy, that they know that you are interested, so that they can like engage with you more. Like your experience will be generally better if you are liked by your team as well. So that's what I learned now.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you. I would say the biggest realization I had by the end of last year was I need to be more intentional with the way I spend my time. I used to feel bad if I didn't spend all my time on the wards, like you were saying, Darren. Um, but then I sort of learned to prioritize like what was actually important as a student in third year, spending time actually learning things relevant to me. And yeah, if for example, like there was a day on a rotation that was not that helpful to me, for example, we had some days where the doctors like notoriously wouldn't show up or something like that. I would, potentially not go in on that day. Just
Potentially.
because potentially. Yeah, just feeling like I'm not wasting my time was something that was hard to learn how to do throughout the year. And then yeah, especially with studying, it was so different between first and second year compared to third year. Like third year, you don't really have anyone spoon feeding you the information that you need to know. There's no like one resource you can go to. And I used to get super overwhelmed and tell myself I have to look at everything, but that was also a waste of time. And I didn't end up getting through the volume of things that I wanted to. So this year I've kind of learned to like look at the really important resources that are definitely correct, as opposed to everything like last year. So doing that has been good. And I found the teaching to be a lot more reliable and really good this year compared to last year. So it's been good to have that to focus on as well. But yeah, just the whole time management thing and then also studying, I would say, yeah, is something that I'm glad that I figured out how to do more this year than last year.
The last thing I want to add is I think I mentioned this yet, but as like someone who's a bit naturally more shy as well, I think being rural has been really good in that way because a lot of the time you are like the first in line to do like some stuff, like whereas in like metro hospitals, there might be like a reg or like and like a junior doctor and like a HMO before you. A lot of the time because like there aren't too many staff. If there's something to do like a cannula or if there's like an interesting history to take, you will be like contacted more, and you don't have to be as like you don't have to take as much initiative, which I found helped because I'm not naturally more outgoing. So that was another benefit of rural as well, which I've learned to kind of take more advantage of this year and just say yes more as well.
Great, thanks. Do you guys have anything else to add? No? All right. Thanks for your time then. Yeah, thanks for coming and sharing your experiences about rural hospital and last year.
Thank you guys. Like and subscribe to the
Thanks.
Shantan. I've always wanted to do that.